there is a schism forming between Antifa and Black Lives Matter, with activists voicing their disdain all over social media for those they declared were milking white guilt for their own personal financial gain. Even several videos were released showing physical altercations between the two groups, all of which was in light of several prominent BLM activists being investigated for embezzling millions of dollars. Now, many of you are shocked by this revelation, and my only question for you is this: why? Seriously, how could you have not sensed this grift much sooner? Black Lives Matter, an organization whose leaders have been open about their communist and black supremacist views, proclaimed that the United States is systemically racist, even though they had bankrolled in 2020 the largest amount of donations in activist history, and mostly from powerful corporations and banking firms, those who hail from the highest echelons of our supposedly racist society. And do you know how much of those billions received actually went to impoverished black neighborhoods? None. Apart from the millions skimmed from the top to crease the palms of cronies, the rest was funneled into Biden's election campaign through Act Blue. Now, if my memory serves, I believe that it was Biden who was the candidate unanimously chosen by the very elite who donated the lion's shares to Black Lives Matter. But make no further mistake, for Antifa, currently wagging a sanctimonious finger at BLM, is an organization that has been equally compromised by the very establishment they pretend to fight. Now, to be clear, your average Antifa member is a moron who truly believes he is fighting the system, even though most of their efforts before 2020 was focused on disrupting the rallies of the only political group that was majority working class and demanding smaller government. But most Antifa members are too physically weak, too emotionally disturbed, and way too incompetent to have organized on their own such a complex and highly successful terrorist campaign last summer. What should have clued you into Antifa receiving establishment aid in order to assault anti-establishment patriots on their behalf was the fact that, in spite of all the vandalism, the arson, and the violence that Antifa inflicted, all the while being video recorded no less, most of these perpetrators were released from police custody with all charges dropped, just to repeat the same offenses and felonies over and over and over again. In fact, most blue state prosecutors spent the majority of the summer going after those who defended themselves against Antifa members than the aggressors themselves. Antifa, an anarcho-communist organization, and Black Lives Matter, a racial segregation communist organization, were showered with a whole lot of praise, pay, and privilege by politicians and corporate heads alike, who both run a supposedly Nazi system, all the while condemning it simultaneously, and for some reason, most of these woke sycophantic elites profit heavily from economic arrangements made in communist China, a nation leading the world in environmental pollution and human rights abuses, exploiting a labor class comprising of mostly non-whites. The resistance, ladies and gentlemen! How fucking woke. Woke is simply a means to keep the working class divided and fighting each other, while the elite profit heavily from all of our subjugation. The truest form of equity in action. Before Occupy Wall Street in 2008, hundreds of diverse activist groups unified together and recognized globalism for what it was: a dystopian world ruled by a handful of bankers. Back then, we didn't give a shit about race or gender. We were only concerned with a return to feudalism. Woke is simply a diversion tactic to convince you that armed, mostly white working-class patriots are your greatest threat. No, the patriots are their greatest threat to establishing in the West the same social oppression that they currently profit from in China, social credit systems and all. The Biden administration, his financial donors, their goon squads commonly known as Antifa and Black Lives Matter, all of them professed this woke bullshit, and all were working together to defeat a populist movement demanding the integrity of constitutional rights and the traditional values that made a republic strong to begin with. Rights and values that all could embrace and benefit equally, regardless of race or gender. However, since their selected puppet has now been installed, This alliance has grown stale, and their useful idiots, who served their purpose for the last several years, are now more of a nuisance than an asset. And many in Antifa know by now that they've been used by the establishment like the gullible tools that they are. This is why you normies are now allowed to see, through corporate media, these BLM leaders as the grifters that they always were. And Antifa is finally being considered by our own alphabet agencies to be treated as terrorists, instead of just an idea that is equally as heroic as the GIs storming Normandy. Yeah, even though my grandfather, who took a bullet at the Rhine during the final push, would have slit all their commie fucking throats. Antifa is about to experience their own version of the Night of the Long Knives. And the Biden administration, in concert with corporate media, will hail our most popular president ever in American history as the hero who finally removed the rioting menace that Trump failed to do. Of course, many of you who voted for this child-sniffing idiot will conveniently forget that it was Biden himself who refused to condemn Antifa while they were burning down every major Democrat-run city in America just to decrease Trump's favorability only a few months before the election. I just don't know who I'm getting fed up with more, them or you.